Have with us today one such architect carving out the path for a better tomorrow with us, with his able and dedicated stewardship to the nation. Please join our hands and welcome Ambassador Dr. Mohan Kumar. Professor Dr. Mohan Kumar is a career diplomat, ex-ambassador to France. It is my distinct honor and proud privilege to have you in our midst, sir. Ambassador Dr. Mohan Kumar has had an outstanding career in the Indian Foreign Services, lasting 36 years, which culminated in his being ambassador to France, based in Paris. The Indo-French strategic partnership was strengthened and consolidated under his watch. The two nations collaborated in spheres such as defense, space, nuclear and solar energy, smart cities, and investment, thanks to the strategic involvement of Dr. Mohan Kumar. Earlier, he was India's ambassador to the Kingdom of Bahrain, where he witnessed and dealt with strategically complex region characterized by events such as the Arab Spring. Ambassador Kumar has enormous expertise in the area of international trade. He was India's lead negotiator, first at the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and then at the World Trade Organization in crucial areas such as intellectual property rights, services, dispute settlement rules, and technical barriers to trade. He was a leading member of India's delegation at the World Trade Organization ministerial conferences held in Marrakesh in 1994, Seattle in 1999, and Doha in 2001. As Joint Secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, Ambassador Kumar oversaw India's bilateral ties with Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Maldives from 2005 to 2007. Ambassador Kumar also has strategic understanding of India's ties with some of her key neighbors, such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Maldives. He oversaw India's ties with these countries as Joint Secretary and head of the division at Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador Kumar's specialization thus includes diplomatic practice and foreign policy, strategic partnership with India's neighbors, multilateral negotiations, especially trade negotiations, climate change, and globalization. Ambassador Kumar holds a master's in business administration from the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, and a doctorate from Sciences Po University, Paris. Ambassador Mohan Kumar is a professor of diplomatic practice at the Jindal School of International Affairs, Sonipat, India, since August 2017. He is also Vice Dean in charge of global initiatives and institution building at the Jindal School of International Affairs. Ambassador Kumar also serves as the chairman of Research and Information System for Developing Countries since June 2018. Ambassador Kumar is fluent, apart from English, in French, Hindi, and Tamil. He is married and has two grown-up children. He is an avid traveler and a voracious reader. Ambassador Kumar has authored a book titled Negotiation Dynamics of the World Trade Organization, an Insider's Account. I've had the honor to hear you for a conference earlier, sir. Believe me, I consider it my privilege and honor to be able to listen to you again. On behalf of the delegates today, I extend a warm welcome. We look forward to knowing from you how diplomacy works on actual ground. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. No, I was just saying thank you very much, Ms. Dwivedi, and the principal of the school. I think I want to congratulate you for holding this first ever Model United Nations online. I don't think it could have been more timely from my point of view. And it's also been very substantive. I was just listening to your speech, and I'm amazed that one of the committees dealt with the line of actual control between India and China. It's such a complex area. I'm not sure I could have handled it, frankly. So it's fantastic that your students have been able to devote some attention to this subject. It's great that you have looked at the gender disparity, and India, I think, is a classic case where I think we need to do much more work on achieving gender balance and gender equality. And I find that you've also looked at the UN Security Council reform and so on. So I find that this conference has been great in terms of the substantive issues that you have covered. I want to begin by saying that the United Nations faces an existential crisis today. And this crisis can be traced back to the international order. What is happening in the international order, the world order, and I'm sure most of you know this, is that the liberal international order, which was established after the Second World War, is drawing to a close. Now, I don't think Mr. Donald Trump, President Donald Trump alone is responsible for this. And I think a lot of events happened before him. But be that as it may, we are looking at a transitory phase in international relations where one order is drawing to a close and another order is yet to be devised or invented. So we are living in the middle of a transition. And when you have a transitory period like this, you're bound to have a lot of confusion. You're bound to have a lot of disarray. You're bound to have nations, countries jostling for power. So that's what you're saying. And that is having a profound impact on the working of the United Nations. The second reason why the UN, I think, faces an existential crisis is because there has been a significant backlash against globalization. This is something all of you should be aware of. The globalization, when defined as the most free and rapid movement of goods, services, people, ideas, I'm afraid globalization as we knew it is going to draw to a close. You're going to have, I think, a modified kind of globalization. We don't know what shape it will take, but I don't think you can go back to the 80s and 90s when there was absolutely the freest possible movement that the world has ever seen in goods, services, people, and ideas. I think nationalism and parochialism and chauvinism has taken root. You would be naive in wishing them away. I mean, you are young adults. I realize you are not at full adults, but you're young adults and you're old enough to realize what I'm saying, that countries are turning inward. Countries are depending more and more on chauvinistic and on very parochial arguments to kind of keep their population up. So we are entering that kind of a world. And obviously, an institution like United Nations, which was, as Madam Principal said, established in the aftermath of the World War II and was designed to prevent a third world war, I think it's losing its purpose because the whole environment around the United Nations has changed. So that is the second reason. The third reason, I think, is also that the multipolar world that we are talking about is yet to take root. So you've had a Cold War period where you had two superpowers battling it out. You then had what is described as a unipolar moment when United States was the unquestioned superpower. And then you have a situation where the US and China, I would describe them as two great powers. And then you have a whole lot of other powers, beginning with European Union, also India, Australia, Japan. You could describe them as middle powers, but no matter how you describe it, you've got these two important poles, US and China, and the rest of the powers are actually swinging things one way or the other. So in this kind of a scenario, it's very difficult for the United Nations to function because the UN was really set up, as I said, it reflected a particular era, 1945-47. If you take the United Nations Security Council, and I'm sure you discussed this, the UN Security Council is awfully out of date. I mean, except for United States and China, which are two big economies and which arguably deserve a place in the UN Security Council, if you take the other three countries, UK, France, Russia, India's economy is actually bigger than any of those three economies, even economically. I'm not even introducing the argument regarding population and so on. Even on GDP terms, India would be marginally higher than Russia, France, and UK, and yet India doesn't find a place. Japan's economy is certainly bigger than France, UK, and Russia, yet Japan doesn't find a place. Germany's economy is big, and Germany is an influential European power, yet Germany doesn't find a place. So what you are seeing in you most, and you must being representative of the real politic in the world. So if that doesn't represent the exact distribution of power in the world, then it becomes that much less legitimate. So when UN Security Council today says something, there is less legitimacy because the representation of the UN Security Council does not accord with the distribution of real power in the world. That really is the principal problem. The other problem that I see with the United Nations is that the United Nations can be accused legitimately of overextension. So today the UN deals with everything under the sun. And to me, that is what has resulted in a weakening of the UN. So the UN, if you take organizations like the UNESCO, you take organizations like the UNICEF, take organizations like the High Commission for Refugees, you take the organizations like the World Intellectual Property Organization, International Labor Organization, there is no subject in the world that the UN doesn't deal with. You have to ask yourself the question, is this wise? Is this sensible? Because I would much rather that the United Nations do a few things, but do it well. So what do you think a reformed United Nations should do? I think the first thing, which I think the UN does well, and let us give credit to the UN. I don't want you to think that I'm being unnecessarily critical of the UN. I think the UN is a great organization and it can be retrieved. It's just that it finds itself in the middle of a crisis. The first thing that the UN should be doing, and is actually doing a good job, is climate change. I was as ambassador to Paris when the climate accords were concluded, the Paris Climate Accords 2015. And frankly, the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change is something I'm extremely proud of. To get some kind of an agreement between 195 countries at various levels of development, various levels of greenhouse gas emissions, various levels of politics involved, small island economies, developing countries like India, other powers like Europe, and you have countries like France in which 80% of electricity is generated by nuclear power. So to get an agreement between a wide array of countries like this is no mean achievement. So I'm extremely proud of what the United Nations has done in the field of climate change. And I think that is an area where I would like the UN to do much more, and it can do a much more. Second is the pandemic. I mean, it is one of those black swan events. I'm sure all of you know what I mean by black swan events. If not, just Google it. But even though this was actually anticipated by a lot of people, it is still described as a black swan event, the coronavirus. The WHO and the UN should be leading this effort. It's unfortunate that that exercise has got mired in politics, but the UN Security Council, for example, has shown itself supremely incapable of dealing with a subject like the pandemic. So the pandemic is the next subject I feel the United Nations should be doing much more. The third, I would say, is the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, in which there has been no progress whatsoever. And that's a shame, because everyone knows that you can't solve the problem of international terrorism. And you've just seen the very unfortunate incidents in Paris, Nice. I'm sure you're watching the news and you're hearing about what is happening in Paris. And France has a long history of Islamic terrorism. But be that as it may, what I'm trying to tell you is we need international cooperation. We need an organization like the United Nations to take the lead in areas like the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. Finally, I would also like the UN to take much more interest in issues surrounding cyberspace. I mean, this is an area that more and more people of your generation will be affected very, very profoundly. So, this is an area where I think the United Nations could take more interest, more efforts, and try to work out a global cooperation in this important area. So, I'm just giving you a bit of a flavor as to what the issues of tomorrow are for the United Nations. The United Nations is dealing with war and peace, but I believe because of the relationship between the United States on the one hand, China, Russia on the other, there is unlikely to be a consensus in the UN Security Council on any issues surrounding war and peace. You're going to have the UN Security Council for the foreseeable future completely stalemated and blocked because of the complex relationship between the United States on the one hand and Russia, China on the other. And I don't think it will change regardless of who becomes the president of the United States next week. So as long as we have this stalemate in international relations, you're not going to be able to have a United Nations Security Council acting on the basis of consensus. So I would much rather that the United Nations looks at the future and looks at issues like climate change, cybersecurity, terrorism, and so on, so that on those issues, I feel the United Nations is well placed to provide leadership in this world. Let me begin perhaps a little bit on what India's outlook in the United Nations is, and I will then finish my speech by giving you some thumb rules of negotiations, since Madam Principal mentioned negotiations as well. By the way, my first posting in 1982, when I was probably your age, was in Geneva, 1982, when I was third secretary and I was accredited to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. That was my first job. And it was exciting. I was all of 23 years old, so probably even older than you. You probably are much younger as well. But 23 years to look at East Timor and decide whether India should support the independence of East Timor or not was a big issue, because we have issues in India, right? We have the issue of Kashmir. We have issues in India which go beyond that. So what do? Indonesia came to us and told us, would you please not support the independence of East Timor? I said, listen, we probably are going to abstain. So the Indonesian ambassador became very angry and he said, no, you should support Indonesia because you've got difficult issues in your country. Anyway, at the end of the day, we abstained the first time, and then of course East Timor became independent. So those are the kind of issues you face in real life. You know what I'm saying? For example, in 1994, I was posted in Morocco, and relations were normal and so on. But suddenly, India recognized the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, and the ambassador was withdrawn. Morocco broke off diplomatic relations with India. The Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, the Sahrawi region, is a very, very peculiar, intractable problem between Algeria and Morocco. And if you ask me, frankly, we shouldn't have taken sides. Again, Morocco came to us and said, you've done a very stupid thing. Why do you recognize states like this when you don't know the issue? Anyway, the bottom line was my diplomatic passport was unrecognized, and we flew the Austrian flag in the Indian embassy. Would you believe it? This is the only time it has happened. And when I was head of interest section, Embassy of Austria, I couldn't call myself Embassy of India because my diplomatic passport was not recognized because of this decision made by India. So I'm trying to give you an idea about real life issues faced by government. For example, Kosovo. Is Kosovo an independent country? Yes, according to many people in the West, but India hasn't recognized Kosovo. We don't recognize Kosovo as an independent country. When it comes to recognition of states, you are not just looking at the political aspect of it, you're not looking at the legal aspect. If you technically want to decide whether you want to recognize a state, you have to go to the Montevideo Convention, which talks about whether the government has enough control over a territory and there are people living there. But the problem is, ultimately, in real life, in the United Nations, the establishment of a state like Kosovo, Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, etc., is not just going to be a political legal issue. It's actually, at the end of the day, it is state politics. Are states going to recognize or not? Bear in mind that in 1971, when Bangladesh was established, first country to recognize Bangladesh was India. And for 4 or 5 years, many countries in the world did not recognize Bangladesh. So you will have to keep this in mind when you discuss, especially the UN human rights. The human rights aspect in the United Nations has been extremely politicized. And the politicization of the UN and its organs has today, I think, started being counterproductive. To some extent, politicization is inevitable. I agree. When countries get together and negotiate in a forum like the UN, some degree of politicization is inevitable. But I think we have taken politicization to the extreme, with the result that nothing can be done in the UN Security Council. For example, the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, UN has been negotiating this for the last 2 decades or more. They can't even define, they can't even agree on the definition of terrorism. That's the reality today. And that is because the issue is highly politicized. Coming back to how India approaches the United Nations or multilateral negotiations, I want to introduce a concept called the Gandhi Litmus test. I think Madam Principal may have heard me speak earlier about this, but since most of you are hearing me for the first time, I would like to beg her indulgence and repeat that anyway. So the Gandhi Litmus test for me is very simple, and I want all of you to be aware of this. In India, we've got about 400 million people who live in extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is defined as $1.79 per head, per person, per month. And this is a very, very small sum. We have 400 million people in India. And those of you who are interested in the subject of poverty, which is very, very complex, by the way, you should look at the Oxford Multidimensional Index of Poverty. It's a great initiative, and it defines poverty not just as calories and food, but also assets. Have you got a cooking gas cylinder at home? Have you got access to sanitation? Have you got a proper roof over your head? So the Oxford Multidimensional Index of Poverty is a great index to decide how many poor people you have. In India, we have 400 million people. For me, as an Indian diplomat negotiating in a multilateral forum like the UN, my Gandhi litmus test is simple. Whatever I do, it should not affect adversely this 400 million people. I have no right to do anything that leaves this 400 million people worse off than what they are. They're already miserable, right? So it's like the Hippocratic oath that doctors take, which is do no harm to the patient. That's your first rule as a doctor. as a doctor, as a medical doctor, the first rule is don't harm the patient. Similarly, as an Indian negotiator, as an Indian diplomat, don't harm the 400 million people. You have no right to do it. By the way, I will extend that oath, that Gandhi litmus test oath, to all of you. If all of you are going to be conscientious citizens of India, you have no right to do anything which hurts this 400 million people. You are incredibly fortunate. In India, you're fortunate because of the family in which you're born. It's just an accident of birth, not because you're great guys, by the way. There are any number of people in the 400 million people who are maybe far more intelligent than you, but just don't have the opportunity. So I have always considered myself very privileged. We are just lucky in India to be where we are. The fact that you can attend the school that you are attending, fact that you can be taught by people like Ms. Dwivedi and others, you're just damn lucky. Forgive my language. So really, you have no right to do anything in your life which hurts this 400 million people. And this is something, if you ask me how I'm going to judge you if I meet you 20 years after now, for me, the most important criterion is, have you made any difference to the lives of these 400 million people or not? If not, I would describe you as an intensely selfish individual who has just taken care of himself or herself. So this is something that you must keep in mind. But I also see in a larger context, India also moving away from multilateralism to what I describe as plurilateralism. When India talks of the quadrilateral security dialogue between India, United States, Australia, and Japan. When India talks of supporting BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Economic Initiative, when India talks of supporting BASIC, which is Brazil, South Africa, India, China, in the context of climate change, BASIC is a very strong grouping. If you're going to talk of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, if you're talking of the Russia, India, China. So it appears to me, because India has not found favor in the UN Security Council, and you know that we've been struggling to get into the UN Security Council for the last 20, 25 years. We are finally getting in next year, but that is as a non-permanent member without a veto. So when I'm talking of India getting in, I'm talking about India getting in as a permanent member of the Security Council with a veto. That is not happening anytime soon. So India has been left with very few options but to go the plurilateral route. In trade as well, the WTO is facing as much of an existential crisis as the United Nations. So India has had to look at what is known as free trade agreements. And we have signed a few free trade agreements with Japan, Korea, and ASEAN. So we are trying to go the plurilateral route, and we are a reluctant plurilateralist. We're not happy going the plurilateral route. India has always believed in multilateralism, but then we have found that multilateralism is under severe attack. So India has had absolutely no option but to look at other plurilateral fora. So what do you think will happen to the UN? Let me spend 2 minutes on the future of the United Nations, and then perhaps give you some rules of thumb for negotiations. Okay. So as far as the future of the United Nations is concerned, I see two things happening. First, obviously, we will wait eagerly for the presidential elections in the United States to get over. And I'm going to be absolutely frank with you. If it is Donald Trump 2.0, he comes for a second term, then I think you can pretty much bid goodbye to multilateralism as we know it. It's very clear, and I'm not passing a value judgment here, but it's very clear that President Donald Trump doesn't believe in multilateralism. He believes that the United States should be doing things bilaterally or plurilaterally. So when the most important country which set up the liberal international order in the aftermath of Second World War, when the most important country withdraws from multilateralism, then you've got a problem. Because a straightforward swap would be United States being replaced by China in the United Nations. That is not something that India would like very much, and a lot of other countries wouldn't like. So we've got a problem. On the other hand, if the presidential candidate Biden wins, the Biden Kamala Harris ticket, if they win, then I think you have half a chance of saving the existing multilateral architecture, including United Nations. You have half a chance. I'm not saying immediately things will fall into place. That would be naive. But I think we have a better chance if Biden wins of trying to reform the United Nations, trying to reform the WTO, trying to put in place a kind of pragmatic multilateralism that will involve the United States sharing power with other powers. So only on those terms you could have a kind of a reformed multilateralism replacing the existing impotent United Nations. So those are the two possibilities that I see. Otherwise, I do believe in economic terms, the power has already shifted to fora like the G20. What the ECOSOC or the UNCTAD should be doing, the G20 is doing today. So if you're looking at economic management of the global economy, if you're looking at the Financial Action Task Force, even if you're looking at climate change, if you're looking at monetary policy, fiscal policy coordination in the light of pandemic, everything is being done by G20. It's not the UN. So power has already shifted to a great extent to the G20. I'm talking of economic power. It is the political power, which regard to war and peace, that continues to be vested in the UN Security Council. But I'm not very sanguine about how long this power can be retained by the UN Security Council in its current form, unless the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese come to some kind of modus vivendi. Okay, so that is my prediction for the UN. We will see on the 4th of November whether we have a new president of the United States or an alternative scenario, which could be a bit of a nightmarish scenario in which you don't have a clear verdict and then things go into a little bit of a limbo. So I don't know. We will have to wait and see. I'm going to finish my talk by talking about negotiations and giving you some advice, some lessons based on what I myself have gone through in the UN and WTO on the basis of India's experience. The first rule of negotiation, in my view, and it applies to life, it applies to your personal life, it applies to your professional life, never allow the best to be the enemy of the good. Let me explain. Supposing India wants something from the United States and you go into a multilateral negotiation. You cannot go into a multilateral negotiation saying my way or the highway. That is no way to negotiate. Negotiation essentially means you have to give something and take something. If you cannot give something in return for getting something, don't negotiate. Don't waste your time and your interlocutor's time. So you need to have a clear understanding of two, three things. One, your maximalist demand. Two, your bottom line. And anything between the bottom line and the maximalist demand is what is known as margin for negotiations. You can play around. Depending on what your adversary or your interlocutor gives, you can give more. But you can't walk into a negotiation saying, I want so much. I don't care whether you can give me or not. If you don't give me, I'm walking out. That is the easiest thing to do, by the way. You're not negotiating. You're being a bully. And you cannot be a bully in a multilateral context. So the first rule of negotiations, Never allow the best to be the enemy of the good. Okay. The second, if you find yourself in a hole, let me repeat the second rule of negotiation. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Because if you dig and you are in a hole, you'll go deeper in the hole. This is simple advice, but we don't follow simple things. You see, common sense is not very common. So if a particular, the meaning of that in actual negotiation terms, if you are negotiating on a particular track and you're not getting results, go back to the drawing board. Change your negotiating position. It is stupid to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. By the way, that is the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That is insanity. So in negotiation, there is no harm if you find that a particular track you've taken is not leading anywhere. So you go back to the drawing board, change your negotiating position. There's nothing wrong with that. And in India, sometimes it is so difficult to convince the government. I've had great difficulty sometimes in the past convincing the government that, listen, the whole world is moving in a particular direction and India is going in the opposite direction. So please change. Otherwise, it's impossible for me to negotiate. So that is the second. If you're in a hole, stop digging. That's the second rule. The third rule, I would say, which is also applicable in life, is timing. In a negotiating situation, timing is everything in life, even in life, but particularly in negotiation. In other words, you should know when to compromise. That is critically important. And it comes from experience, it comes from wisdom. It doesn't come necessarily from knowledge, it comes from wisdom. You have to know how much to push your negotiating adversary. You know, if you keep pushing him beyond a point, he's going to say, to hell with you, I'm walking out. If you don't push him enough, you're not being a good negotiator. So what is the ideal situation? The ideal situation is you put enough pressure, and when the timing is perfect, you tell him, good, I accept what you're saying or what you're giving. Let's do the deal. It's a deal. You have to know when to do that. And timing is something critically important. I find it fascinating that in 2001, when I was involved in Doha negotiations in the WTO, and we concluded the WTO Doha negotiations, when it came to the Indian Parliament in 2001, the parliament criticized people like me who negotiated for India, and they said this is a lousy deal. Do you know today we are trying to save the Doha round? So it's timing. What was unacceptable 2001 has now become a life or death matter for India in 2020. So this is something you need to keep in mind. Timing in negotiations is everything. Last rule, which is also an interesting rule for countries, individuals, be careful what you wish for in negotiations. Be careful what you wish for in negotiations, because you might get it. You know what I'm saying? It's real irony that sometimes we walk into a negotiation saying we need this for the country, and we are not sure whether it is good for the country or bad, but we want it. So you have to be particularly careful what you want as a negotiating outcome. Have you thought it through? Have you thought things through? I will give you a concrete example and then finish my speech. I was a textile and garment negotiator. Okay. So before the WTO came into force, textiles and garments trade was done on the basis of quotas. We had a quota system. That is, India was entitled to 20,000 shirts in the US market. India was entitled to 50,000 blankets or bed sheets in the European market. That is how textile garment trade was done. In the WTO Uruguay round, people like me argued for India that we should get rid of quotas. We should completely get rid of quotas. I asked the Indian textile industry, do you think this is a good idea? Oh, they said, absolutely. This is a fantastic idea. India will rule the world in textiles and garments if you get rid of quotas. I said, are you sure? Because are you competitive enough? They told me, no, you don't know what you're talking about. We are so good. We will take over the world. I've still got my notes to prove it, by the way. I'm not exaggerating. An American diplomat came to me. He was a good friend. And he came to me and said, Mohan, are you sure you want to eliminate quotas in textiles and garments? I told him, he was David. We used to call him Dave. So I said, Dave, absolutely. My textile industry tells me they want to rule the world. He says, Mohan, you're making a big mistake. If you remove quotas, the countries which will benefit will be China, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, even Bangladesh. India will not benefit. I said, no, this is nonsense. India has got such a great textile industry, such a great past. We have been growing cotton. We make such good shirts. We will take over the world. So I'm not accepting. The American told me, okay, if that is what you want, we will get rid of quotas. We did that. Trust me, today, I feel he was right, I was wrong. This is what I mean by be careful what you wish in negotiations. We never thought that by getting rid of quotas, the countries which will benefit will be countries like China and not India. India has also benefited, to be fair, but we are nowhere near taking over the world. So we were wrong in our negotiating objective. So this is what I'm trying to tell you. In the real world, you have to be careful what you wish for. Have you done your homework in terms of understanding what is in your interest? That's not easy sometimes. In a country as complex as India, where we have small scale sector, we have the khadi industry, we have the jute industry, we have the cotton industry, it's very difficult to coordinate. So I think I want to conclude here by saying that the United Nations is this amazing animal. I had this wonderful opportunity to start my life with the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva. Great fun. By the way, we used to work till 2 o'clock in the morning because all voting was happening at 12 o'clock. And those were the days of no mobile, no laptop, no social media, no email. So once at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a vote and we had not gotten our instructions from Delhi. So I looked at my boss. I said, what do we do? She said, it was a lady boss. She said, well, this is a problem. Do you think we should abstain? I said, no. I think what we should do is we will look at the voting pattern of India and the Western countries. So we looked at I gave her a sheet of paper voting in the last 2 years, whatever the Western countries have done, India has done the opposite. So I said, ma'am, the best thing is don't wait for instructions from Delhi, just vote opposite of West. This was 1982, by the way, how things have changed. We have now changed so much in our foreign policy, but that's because, communications were so difficult in 1982. You couldn't even get through to Delhi. You had to go through the international dialing network and so on. I mean, you guys will laugh when I tell you all this, but I just wanted to say that we have come a long way. The United Nations will continue, so make no mistake. The question is, can the United Nations do three things? Number one, can it reform? Number two, can it fulfill the objectives for which it was set up? And third, can it deal with issues like terrorism, cybersecurity to make the world a better place? Those are the questions that will dominate the United Nations for the next 5 years. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Ms. Dwivedi, thank you very much.